hello everyone. My name is Charmaine. My account, The Canadian Wonder. I teach people how to travel cheaper, longer, and happier on a budget. And I also show people different alternative lifestyles. So today I have Alice with me, and she is a voice actor. And I'm going to give you the mic to talk about yourself.
Oh gosh. Okay, so the super long story compact in 2020. Yeah, right before COVID hit, my boyfriend and I were like, wow, life is really boring. Being an adult kind of sucks, and let's go travel. So we bought a decommissioned school bus. It's a 30-foot yellow school bus. We gutted the thing, we renovated it and restored it, and then we both needed jobs that we could work on the road or work remotely. And before COVID, when nobody wanted to allow people to work remotely, I had done a couple of jobs for Voiceover, and I decided to just try it out with the hopes of making a couple $100s every month for gas money. And so I made an account on Fiverr, and my first month I made like $1,000, and I was like, holy crap, this might be a sustainable thing that I could do on the road. So I worked my full-time job, and then I worked Voiceover after I'd got home, and did that for a few months. And about 4 months in, I was making about the same amount of money that I was as a content manager, but I was working part-time instead of full-time, and I was working when I wanted to. And so I did the thing that my mommy told me not to do, and I quit my job and said, let's see if this works out. So thank God it did. And now we travel full-time in the bus while I record voiceovers. I have a little tiny, I'm not going to use the word studio, but I have a recording space on the bus that I use. So we travel full-time. Right now we're in Missouri, and I do voiceovers. I also do virtual facilitating, which is where I lead meetings and presentations. And then I'm also doing user-generated content. So companies typically send me products, and then I make videos for the products. So that's probably the more condensed version of how I strangely got here.
I love it. And I think it is very tricky. It's not easy to find a remote job. Yeah. And especially, your own business, your own freelance kind of business where you're actually making enough money to replace a full-time income.
For sure. And the good thing is our expenses really just now come down to gas money, cell phones, and food. Mm-hmm. That's the majority of our expenses, but the gas money alone is a lot of money. So I'm grateful that our living expenses are pretty low, but it does add up the same way. So we're just lucky it worked out.
Yeah. I mean, gas has gone up a lot recently, right? In the last year or so. It's crazy.
Yeah. Getting just to go about 1,000 miles for us right now is like over $1,000. So whoa. We got to plan it out. We got to plan it in advance and figure out where we're going and be strategic and whatever else.
Amazing. Okay. So I know I do actually obviously have a couple of people from your channel, and obviously they know what's voice acting, but did you want to explain a little bit about what is voice acting and what does that entail?
Yeah. So the technical definition of voice acting is using your voice for either a character or to give people information. So you probably hear voice actors every day. You see them on YouTube ads, you see them on Instagram ads, you hear phone recordings. If you call a company, you see them on commercials. We're everywhere. And I love it because I get paid to basically talk to myself and be silly and goofy, and that's the best part.
Yeah, and I know there's different types as well. So like you said, there's so many different niches that you can join as a voice actor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are so many types. There's also, I think the most interesting one for me that I don't actually do personally, but it exists, is called audio description. So they have, for example, if you go on Netflix, you can turn on audio description, and it's for people who are blind. And in between the dialogue of characters, you'll hear a voice actor explaining what's in the scene. So it's really cool. It's such a different type of voice acting. And then you have audiobook narration where somebody reads you a book, or you have commercials, or you have e-learning where you're telling somebody how to do something. There are so many facets of voiceover, and it's so much fun because depending on your personality and who you are and your goals, you can kind of fit where you have your strengths. So it's really neat how many different genres there are.
Absolutely. So what kind of genres are your favorite?
Oh gosh. I'll be honest, I did my first kids book today, my very, very first one, and it was so much fun because I got to like be the characters and talk all silly like I'm speaking to a group of kindergartners, which I find to be so much fun. Commercial work's always fun because you can go online and watch your video with some really expensive production and big companies, and you're like, holy crap, I did that. So that's neat. But for the majority of projects, I just like when I can really inject my personality and have fun with it.
Nice. Yeah. And I think it's nice because something you could kind of expand over time, and you could try different niches once you figure out how to be a voice actor.
Right. And like video game characters and cartoon characters, those are super duper fun. But that's for me, that's a skill set that I'm still learning. There's so many different things to work on in voiceover, but it's so much fun.
Yeah, and I assume that every single type is different too, right? Like if you have to be a goofy character, that is so different than being in a serious commercial.
Right. Totally different skills. And ultimately it does come down to acting, but usually people are good at a couple different things. And like, for example, I'm good at like the girl next door, the young mom, the fun conversational. But if you give me like an authoritative read that's super serious, it does not go over well. So I just try to stay in my lane and do what I'm good at.
Yeah.
Maybe down the road, but not now.
And I think that's the key, right? To find what you're good at, or, the character that you're best fit for.
Exactly. You play to your strengths. And if you do step outside of that, just make sure you do it not while you're on a really important meeting with somebody important. Like, practice it beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to ask you, how did you choose voice acting as your choice of, digital nomad lifestyle?
Yeah. So growing up, I'd always mimic commercials. I'd always repeat people, and I just always found it fun to just mimic people. And so growing up, I'd always like sing the jingles, and I'd repeat the DJs on the radio, and I'd like to read growing up out loud. The teacher had a book and they'd ask for volunteers. I'd always be the idiot up front. And I didn't really know it was a job until I switched from working in television news over to working in advertising. And I started hiring voice actors. And I remember thinking at one point, like, damn, I should probably try this one day. And at one point, one of the voice actors, we couldn't work with them anymore. And as a joke, I just read one of the scripts in front of me, and my coworkers were like, that was kind of good. And I said, that's weird because that was a joke. And so I did a couple voiceovers for them, and then I did a couple at my next job. And then when we bought the bus and I needed a job, I said, you know what, let me just try this. It can't hurt. I'll make an account and see what happens. And my career went off unexpectedly.
Amazing. And did you find there's a specific niche that was easier to start off as?
Oh, gosh, yeah. Phone recordings in the beginning were my bread and butter because I wasn't very good at acting yet. And phone recordings are a really easy way to fake it. Thanks for calling something. And my earlier ones were terrible, but you could fake it enough in phone recordings that it wasn't that big of a deal. So that's kind of where I started, and then I kind of branched off into a little bit of corporate and commercial work, and then I actually got better at acting, thank God, so I started booking real jobs.
Amazing. And when you started doing that, did you have any training that you took to help you improve your skill as you went along?
In the beginning, no. I had worked with a couple voice actors, so I kind of had an idea, and I worked in TV, so I knew how they should have sounded, but I didn't really have the acting skills. So when I started making money, I said, I should probably be kind of good at this if I'm going to be getting paid for this work. And that's when I started doing training. So probably about 3 months into voice acting is when I got my first class, and I took a one-on-one with a teacher. And then I did I think 6 sessions, and then I switched to somebody else. So I'm always learning. I'm always taking classes and reading and stuff like that. But it took me probably about 3 months to start doing actual classes with somebody.
And I have a question about the classes. So are the classes kind of like they are categorized, like voice acting for commercials or voice acting for, if you're a cartoon character?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So typically you'll have a coach who specializes in certain types of voiceover. So like you said, you'll have a commercial coach. You might have, there's some that kind of get grouped together a little bit because they're kind of similar, but like video game, that's an entirely different genre, and audio description will be an entirely different one as well. So you do have coaches that kind of specialize in certain types of voice acting.
Nice. So I guess you have to kind of narrow down which one you really want to deep dive into, and then really finding a coach and a class that's right for that.
Yeah, exactly. And it can be a little tricky because there's a lot of coaches out there. So finding one can be challenging, and especially because if you get the wrong coach, they're going to teach you things they're going to teach you bad habits. And trying to get rid of bad habits takes a really long time. And that's why, for example, people who come from radio and radio DJing and announcing, they usually have a hard time transitioning into voice acting because everything sounds so over the top and the last word is always emphasized. So they have to kind of get rid of that. So a lot of people go into it thinking, oh, I have this leg up, I worked in radio, but then they go to a coach and the coach spends the entire time just helping them get away from the radio voice. So it is hard to pick a coach, and I always recommend if you're going to pick one, just ask other professional voice actors that are working and that are making money in the field who they'd recommend, so you don't get stuck with somebody that you're getting your bad habits from.
Yeah, that's good advice. I know that you talked about, like, I know part of your profile, you write that, you made $10,000 in your first 3 months, which I think is obviously very, very impressive. And I guess I want to ask a little bit if you could expand on how you really got started in that, or, if there was something that helped in starting out in your first 3 months.
Yeah. So like I said, the first thing I did was make an account on Fiverr, and I had used Fiverr a couple times to buy random stuff online. And I really just hoped that I could make any money. And my first couple of orders went well, and then I got slapped with a bunch. And at that time, my prices were really low. So people didn't have much to lose by booking with me. And it just took off. And I guess people also ask me like what tips I have for Fiverr, or if there was like a secret formula, or if I did anything specific. In the beginning, I just priced myself low enough that people didn't have many hangups because the cost was low enough. And I tried to set myself apart. And a lot of voice acting comes down to the same skills for people. So I have experience in this. I have a studio that has this capabilities and whatever else. And I tried to offer things that other people didn't. So, for example, I have a 4-hour delivery option. And a lot of people book with me simply because they can get their audio super fast. Or even if other people do offer that, they don't post it. So people will book me specifically because of that. And I think a lot of my work in the beginning, because I had a 1-day delivery and my prices were low, definitely a little too low looking back, but it did the job and I got a lot of experience out of it. But I think in the beginning it just came down to offering something that other people didn't, or just being more salesy about it and, advertising it in a more clever way that people would latch on to it and want it.
Yeah. And did you have any ads that, I don't know if that's an option for Fiverr, but is there a paid ad option that you could kind of boost your ranking up in the listing?
Yeah, they do offer promoted ads on Fiverr, and I did those as soon as I could because I have big old bold letters in my thumbnail that says 4-hour delivery. Yes. So basically, whatever I had that set me apart, I really tried to drive that home. And at that point, I had done a couple of jobs for like local branches of organizations. So I did one for like a local boys and girls club as a pro bono, a free job to help them out. But I could write on my description, like I've worked for national companies because it is a national organization. So I was just leveraging the things that made me stand apart from other people.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, is really finding your competitive edge.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Knowing what makes you stand out when everybody's kind of offering the same thing can be really tricky.
Yeah, and I find it really tricky on Fiverr because one, it's such a popular platform and there's so many people on it, but two, also because the rates are very low. So it seems like everyone has to offer, it's like a competitive rate where you have to see who has the lowest rate and how fast you can be booked because of it.
Right, and that's where it gets tricky. Is a lot of people call it a race to the bottom because the people with the lower prices end up having a leg up. And unfortunately, that is true in a lot of ways, because the lower your prices, the more people will book with you because it's less of a risk in case it doesn't turn out good. So there is that, but luckily there still are enough people that value a high quality voiceover and know they're going to pay for it. So there is a chance, like it's still possible, but it does make things a little tricky.
But you would still say that, Fiverr is still a really good way to get started, even if you're offering a lower rate. So you can build your portfolio in that way.
Yeah, I would still recommend, especially, thinking back to my early days, I was not charging like the industry standard, but at the same time, I was so unskilled that I should not have been charging the industry rates. Like, I shouldn't have, because it wasn't very good. So I was able to earn money while I was still learning and then use that money to pay for my classes. So it worked out, and I don't regret doing that, and I still think it's a really good place for new people to start to test things out, to see where they fit in the voiceover world, and to just kind of go from there.
Yeah, and I think it's also just a great way for you to see if this is something that you enjoy and what kind of jobs you can get.
Yeah.
And I guess the earning potential too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I want to talk about equipment. Because I actually, when I was promoting this, some people were asking me about, what equipment is important and what kind of equipment do you use? And I'm sure that has changed over time from when you started to probably an upgrade of what you have now. But did you wanted to go a little bit overview of the equipment that is essential for being a voice actor?
Yeah. First and foremost, you need a soundproof space. So for beginners, I always recommend trying a closet. Usually the small closet that you have that's filled with clothes is a really good place to start, because all the fabric and the clothing absorbs sound. So in the beginning, I started in a laundry basket with holes drilled in it and a mattress topper along the side. It was horrible. I could never book any like professional jobs on it, but for somebody just starting, it worked. It did the job. I learned about sound. I learned how to edit. Like I learned all that. So first things first, you need a soundproofed and acoustically treated space. Once you get into a little bit more, you can build your own PVC booth and like hang up moving blankets or soundproof blankets. But to start, typically you can just use the closet. Sorry, I'm in a park and there's people, so apologies if you hear them. Next up, you will obviously need a microphone, and there are lots of different options, but there's two types of mic. There's a USB mic that plugs directly from your microphone into your computer. And then there's an XLR mic, which uses another little box called an interface. And the interface converts your sound waves into a format that the computer can read. So basically, to start, you need the soundproof space, a microphone, cables, an audio interface, that little box that converts the sound, and then a computer. So those are kind of the really basics. I started out with a pop filter and a stand and all this other stuff, but because I have such limited space, I can't even use half of it anymore. So I got this thing called an ISO box, which is just kind of a box a little bit bigger than your head, and you literally just put your head inside and record. And it is the most claustrophobic apparatus you will ever use in your life. But it does the job, so I can't really complain.
And it saves space too, sounds like.
Yes, it saves, rather than having a full booth, I can just pull this thing out. It's on track, so I just pull it into the hallway and like stick my head in, and then I can record that way.
Interesting. Okay. And I think I lost my train of thought. I was gonna say, because you are in an RV full time, what kind of audio, like what was your setup using doing this kind of job in an RV?
I didn't have many. Are you talking about my recording space?
Yeah. How did you build your audio booth
Okay,
while
gotcha.
traveling in an RV?
Yeah, it was really challenging. Most people just said it couldn't be done, and I was like, well, they said a lot of things couldn't be done, and here I am. So we made it happen. It's not the most perfect booth in the world, but it does the job, and I haven't gotten any complaints from anybody. But basically the way we approached it was to save space. We wanted to put the ISO box on track so that it could slide out into the hallway. So rather than it being out all the time, when I need to use it, I pull it out into the hallway, and then there's a back flap that lifts up, and I stick my head in. So we had the ISO box, and then around the ISO box, we put a bunch of soft wood to help it absorb sound versus it bouncing all over. And then we also put a rubber layer of soundproofing material underneath the walls and the floors. So that helps with just sound. It prevents sound from coming into the bus. And it actually does a really good job because we hear all sorts of things while traveling, like obviously lawnmowers and stuff like that, but like the sound of chickens, the sound of tractor trailers, there's people in Cracker Barrel parking lots. Like there's always noise, and we did a damn good job of limiting how much noise comes into the bus and then limiting the surfaces that sound can bounce off of inside the bus.
Sounds like a lot of work.
It was a lot of time and a lot of money.
Yeah, really. I mean, like you said, like I'm guessing when you're driving or, wherever setting you are, there is a lot of outside noise. So really to prevent all that sounded like you needed a lot of soundproof materials to really prevent that.
Yeah. And we do have insulation like a regular house, but it's so much thinner because we have so much less space to use. So it was a lot of planning, but it came out pretty good. I do know other people who have buses that record their voiceovers in them, and they typically will build. I know somebody who built a little studio inside of a trailer that they pulled. So this was like a regular full-size thing. But the issue you run into there is they get so hot or they get so cold, and you have no way of heating it or anything like that. So it gets a little tricky, but we made this work. I haven't seen anybody do what we did, but there are ways to do it. You just got to think outside the box.
Yeah. So what is this RV setting that you have? I think you said is a converted bus. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it's a 30-foot from bumper to bumper converted school bus, and you can see more pictures on the Life's Too Short bus page. But we have, so the first few feet are the engine, but we have about 22 feet of livable space from front to back. So we have a bed that converts into our front seat, and then we have a small kitchen area, and then we have the bathroom, and that's pretty much our entire living space.
Yeah, and then on top you built a little audio booth on top of that as well.
In one area of the bus, we have a tiny little audio booth where I have my little thing on tracks, and then it's like right above the solar, and then we put other stuff on top. So we just squeezed it in there as best as we can between the kitchen and the bathroom.
I'm always really impressed with people who have an RV or a Skoolie, because I feel like you have to be so technical and you always have to be ready for anything that goes down.
Oh my gosh. This was a crash course in just letting letting things go and embracing what you have. And I've learned so much, especially when it comes to the bus and organization and having space for things. Like, you have to have a space for every single thing you own. You can't just like put it on the counter, mm-hmm. because you got to get underneath the counter, or for us, our counters lift up. So everything has to have an exact space, especially while you're driving. Like, you can't just shove things in corners, because if you hit the brakes too hard, everything's coming forward. So a lot of ingenuity. You have to be real, think outside the box and be real crafty when it comes to some things.
Yeah, and there's so much technical elements. Like, I think you just mentioned solar panels. Like, that's not what most people know how to do.
Yeah. And that was a learning curve, and we have to be really conscious of how much water we're using, how much energy. Like, if it's a cloudy day, we might be able to only use our air fryer for like 5 minutes. So you have to just heat something up really quickly, or, like, you have to be really strategic. You have to really think about, everything's very intentional when you live in a tiny space, especially one that you have like solar and you have a limited utilities, or the big doozy.
Yeah. And so I guess my next question for you is, how did you balance this kind of lifestyle? I don't know how often you travel, or, how often you take jobs, and how do you guys work on the bus? What's this arrangement that you essentially created, to balance this work and travel lifestyle?
Good question. It does get tricky. We try to stay places, for at least a couple of weeks before we move on, and that does help, because trying to record and work around travel days is really challenging, because even if it's 4 hours of driving, you have to add in a half hour every time you get gas. You got to prepare the bus to move, which takes about 20 minutes. Then you got another 20 minutes to settle down. So it does require a lot of planning. We do try to be somewhere for a couple of weeks minimum, so that we can see the area and not be super stressed out all the time. My boyfriend he'll pick up jobs when we stop somewhere. So for example, in the summer months, it's called work camping. So basically, it's usually a campground, and you'll stay there for free, plus they pay you to work. So we'll get a free spot for the summer, and then he'll get paid on top of that, and plus I do my own work. So it works out really well. For anyone who does want to travel full-time, work camping is the way to go. Like, you get to really explore places. You get to kind of have a community aspect, because being on the road can get really lonely. Mm-hmm. So having a community and people that you see every day is really nice. And of course, you get paid for a lot of them. So that's always good.
Amazing. Yeah. And where do you guys usually stay? Do you usually go on campgrounds, or do you like rent a space somewhere? Or I know I've read a lot of people just find somewhere like an overnight parking.
Yeah, it totally depends on where we're going and what we're doing. Sometimes we'll stay with friends or family. Other times we'll book a spot at a campground, and other times, if we're just passing through a night or two, we'll just hit up parking lots. And so, like, we've become really good friends with Cracker Barrel, Walmart, Cabela's, Bass Pro Shop. Like, we know all the spots for single night parking, but generally we try to stay at campgrounds. Usually it's just a better setting. It's more safe. So we try to stay there, but it just kind of depends.
And campgrounds are also okay for colder weather, or just mostly summer months?
We built the bus so that we could withstand really cold. Last winter, we have a wood burning stove in the bus, and that'll get us to below freezing. So last winter, it was, with the wind chill, it was negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit. And we had that wood burning stove pumping because it was so cold, but it was fine. It was like 70 in the bus. So it was really comfortable. So we can go down really, really cold, although in the winter months, we do try to stay south, because generally the cold just sucks.
Yeah, and that it's more energy on your bus. Like you said, you have to really count how you use your energy consumption. And I'm guessing that wood burning that you're talking about is using a lot of energy.
Yeah, the wood burning stove. So we have a heater in the bus, but it uses so much energy that we kind of have to choose. Like, okay, we can have the heater on for 2 hours, but we have to shut it off, or we can use the wood burning stove all night. But the downside of the wood burning stove is you have to wake up every 5 hours and put the wood in and make sure it's still going. So it's kind of a trade-off, and that's just kind of why we avoid the really cold spots. It's just a pain in the ass.
Okay, yeah. So the heater will use the energy, but the wood burning is really like you're actually using wood, so really natural resources.
Wood for the wood burning stove. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, that's so much easier, but of course, like you said, there's a hazard as well.
Yeah. Yes, and everything's so small, and the wood burning stove is like 3 feet from the bed, so it's freezing in there. You shove a bunch of wood in there, close it, lay down, and then it's 90 degrees. So it's a balance. You're like I said before, you just gotta go along for the ride.
Amazing. I want to also ask, I know previously you mentioned a little bit about Fiverr, about finding jobs. Is that still a recommended platform, or is there any other ways that you find jobs for voiceovers?
Yeah, like anything else, it's got its ups and downs. Every single platform out there that allow you to get voiceover work, there's a give and take. Fiverr's the same as everything else, where they take 20% of your proceeds, but the benefit is clients come to you. So other voice acting websites like voices.com or voice123, you have to audition for jobs. So it's kind of just choose your evil in a way. But I always recommend Fiverr is a good spot because, like I said, you don't have to do any marketing. There's not many websites out there where clients come to you, and that's one of the few. So there is money to be made. They made a crap ton of money last year. There still is a lot of money on the platform, so I always recommend it. It can't hurt to try. People are charging industry rates, other people don't, but you can kind of figure out where you fit in and go from there.
Yeah, and I think I've heard a lot of people talk about, getting their start on Fiverr and how that really helped them to start building the digital nomad career.
Yeah, for sure. Fiverr has helped a lot of people become remote and really start their career doing gig work versus having a full-time job. So I always recommend people just check it out and see how it goes.
Yeah, and I think it just is that patience as well, and setting the rate that attracts people.
Yeah, and you do learn real quickly. If you have your prices low enough, you're gonna get certain types of clients that are just a headache to work with. So you got to find your sweet spot. It might take some time, but you'll get there eventually.
Yeah. And do you get to filter your clients, or did you just like any job that kind of came up? You're like, okay, I'm gonna take it and let's go.
Yeah, you can. My pricing structure typically does a pretty good job of keeping out people that I wouldn't really want to work with. These are the people that, request multiple revisions. They don't know what they want. Typically, that comes with having lower prices. So given that I'm pretty much at industry standard pricing for voiceover, I usually get pretty good clientele. And if somebody does message me beforehand, or if they even place an order and I can just tell by the way it's written or what they're asking for, if I know that it's not going to be a good fit, or if it's going to be a real pain in the ass, because now that I've done so many orders, I kind of have an idea of what to look out for and red flags. If I see that, I will usually cancel the order before it gets too far, because I've learned I've done the crappy jobs on Fiverr, and I've learned very quickly what's not worth my time.
Amazing. Yeah. And like you said, that just takes a little bit of time to understand the platform, to understand the people who's on the platform and the people who are reaching out to you.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. I wanted to ask, before we end, I actually want to ask, what is some advice that you would have for somebody who's exploring voice acting or want to learn more about voice acting?
I think my biggest piece of advice, there's no right or wrong way to get into voice acting. Please find your own path. Just don't listen to what other people say all the time. Be open to experiences. Do the shitty jobs that don't pay you very well just to get the experience. ask friends and family. Somebody's always looking for something in terms of voiceover, if they know it or not. Maybe you know somebody with a business who needs a phone recording. Like, there's always something. There's a lot of like indie passion projects. There's so much good stuff out there. Don't be afraid to try. Don't be afraid to suck, and learn as much as you can. I think that's my biggest advice.
And do you find that, like, when people are starting out, maybe they should maybe listen or kind of research a lot about the niche and kind of dive deep into what it is like, so they can have a better idea of what is expected from them as someone that people would hire?
Yeah, for sure. And there's always trends in voice acting. Like right now, the conversational read is super in. They want you to sound like you're talking to a friend. And it's really good to be on with the trends and understand. But also, some people get so bogged down by what they're supposed to be doing or what they're supposed to sound like that they kind of lose their own unique thing that makes them them. And I think what a lot of people forget is the thing that's going to book you jobs is the you that you bring. Sounding like somebody else, they're going to hear through it. You're not going to sound authentic. You're not going to sound real. And the example that I always use is I was recording my demo and I was having a hard time getting into the character. And when I finally did, my voice cracked. And in my brain, I was like, oh God, I screwed it up again. And my demo producer was like, that was it. That was perfect. That was you. Your voice cracks in real life, and that's what you brought. And I was like, damn, I've been overthinking this the whole time. So figure out what makes you you and use that to your advantage. Don't try to sound like other people or say, what does a voice actor sound like? Like, be you. Be who you are as a human while reading a script, and you're going to nail it.
Yeah, and I remember because I took a bit of your course of how to become a voice actor. And I remember one of the elements that you were talking about is trying to find the character that you think you can be. Like, you need to find if, what is the age that you think you sound like, or you're young or old, or you're 20 to 30. So really finding that voice that you think sounds most realistic and really pitching that.
Yeah, for sure. You have to know where you fit in. Like, there's plenty of jobs that I want to do that my voice isn't really cut out for. And I do a lot of colleges and universities because that's what works for my voice. So it definitely takes some time figuring out where you fit in and what you're good at and what you're really not good at. Because I had a bunch of jobs that I've done in the past that they were like, yeah, this isn't really what I'm going for. And then I realized, yeah, I'm just not very good at this. Super serious stuff that's like strong and powerful. I am not your girl. You should find somebody else because it's probably not going to be what you want it to be. So it does take time to find your strengths and what type of work comes along with that.
Right, and what is right for your voice. Like, if you have an energetic voice versus if you're very serious.
Exactly.
And I think that comes a lot with your personality as well.
For sure. Personality plays a huge role, but a lot of people go into it thinking, okay, how do I sound like a voice actor? And that's not what you want to do. You want to be you. That's all. So it does come down to knowing your strengths and where you fit in, most importantly.
Okay, good. So I will not be good for serious voiceovers. I know that.
Like you won't hear me doing like any movie trailers, like what is it? I forget. That was a funny joke if I remembered what the words were. But yeah, like movie trailers, not going to happen. Not going to happen. But maybe one day. We'll see. Maybe I'll get old and crotchety and cranky, and then I'll be perfect for those.
Well, that's the thing too, right? It changes over time, I would assume, because the older you get, or, your voice changes and your personality change perhaps as well.
Yeah.
So
I haven't been doing it long enough to really know that, but there are people who have been doing this for 30 years and they have to change. Same as musicians and musical artists. They can't sing the same key or pitch that they did a few years ago, and you kind of have to adjust. When I first started, I did a lot of college student, and now I'm getting a lot more young mom roles than I did. So it is a shift. It's a little depressing at times because I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm getting older. That's a thing. But it does open up more possibilities and experiences. So I'm down for the ride.
Right. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like if you're doing this at 20 or you're doing this at 30 years old or 40 years old, that's a complete different type of voice or even personality, perhaps even,
For
you know,
sure.
a shift in your life.
Yeah.
A life shift.
Yeah. And a lot of companies don't want a 50-year-old that might sound super excited versus a child that sounds super excited. It's just a different vibe. So it does change as you get older, but it also probably is in your benefit in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And before we end, I want to give you a little opportunity to promote your course, because I know you just had a course that came out.
Yes, yes. I have had so many people reach out to me and they're like, what do I do to learn? And I said, you know what? Let me just take all my knowledge and put it into a course that's super affordable. So the course right now is $69, and it's like every aspect of voice acting that you could possibly think of, from performance to auditioning for jobs to editing tips to marketing yourself and getting an agent. I really tried to make the course as affordable as I possibly could. Most courses run anywhere from $400 to $1,000, or they're a monthly fee. I really was just like, you know what? Let's do a one-time charge. People can learn as much as they possibly can. I'm not in it to make like a boatload of money or anything. I want people to be able to follow their dreams, because that voice acting gave me the ability to travel full time. And my goal is to help people do it and explore it in a really affordable way. So it's called Speak Easy, Earn Hard. It's currently $69, and you get some free monthly Q&As with me, which I have to plan one for next week. I have to send my email out. But it has monthly freebies, monthly Q&As. You get lifetime course access, all that good stuff. And hopefully you enjoyed it, because it would suck if you didn't.
No, I thought it was fantastic. I loved how you broke it down into, you know, how to read the script and gave a lot of examples. I thought it was really easy to follow. And for somebody who didn't know what to expect going in, I was blown away. I thought it was fantastic.
Good. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So I am going to just say thank you so much for coming on to this live. I know we had some technical difficulties, but it all worked out.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was so much fun. I love talking about this, and you are a fantastic interviewer. So well done, and I appreciate it.